Death at the gates again. Howling my name. Can't greet you today. I have a war to win.
Hello there, Sarah from 17 once again. This is my Wolfenstein Uber difficulty video walkthrough. This is the Chapter 12, Gibraltar Bridge. It's a two-parter, and it's one of the more combat-focused levels on the game. And what I mean by that is, of course, there's been traversal, there's been stealth sequences, there's been interactive cutscene-esque experiences, and what they've all had in common is it's been gunfight, you know, different piece of pacing, gunfight, different piece of pacing, whereas this level is pretty much back-to-front gunfights, and it's quite long, it's quite challenging, and hopefully this video will help anybody who's having issue with it. That right there is the upgrade to the assault rifle. I personally think it makes the assault rifle look really crap, and you can't take it off, but it has to be said it is incredibly useful. Anybody who tells you that the rocket launchers aren't very good on this game has not used them correctly, and I myself was guilty of thinking it wasn't that powerful, and then I used it against the last boss on Uber, and it destroyed him very quickly because I had a ton of rockets. And as you just saw there, it's really good at taking out those turrets, and you want to watch out for those things because they will kill you quicker than pretty much anything else in this level. And as before, there's a big gauntlet in it too. Oh, this is quite interesting. There's something down here, but as you can see, when I tried to jump and mantle towards it, I was not confident that the game was not going to kill me, so I decided not to go and grab whatever it was. And I have a little look around. You will notice that I do get turned around a little bit on this particular mission, because knowing where to go can sometimes be tricky. This is a rocket launcher guy, so the reason I'm bunny hopping is so I don't give him a stationary target. And once again, we're going to utilise the fact that he could not shoot at me then, because he would hit the cover and hurt himself, and thus he never fired. And then I hit him a couple times with some rockets, and we kill him, and then we get to move on. But this, just like the levels before it, does have a couple of enemy gauntlets with quite a few heavies. It's pretty challenging, but as long as you play, you know, tentative, as long as you've got some good distance and you rely on the precision cutting weapon, the LK something, I can't remember the acronym, it's all pretty manageable stuff. The place where I died the most in this particular sequence was when you have to jump to the helicopter before it carries you up to that slaughterfest. It was the jump to the helicopter that killed me, believe it or not, because of the way my controller was malfunctioning. So you shouldn't have any issue with that, as I wander around picking up ammo and looking for the direction that the game wants me to go, which, as you can see, can be slightly confusing at times. And at this moment in time, I have just been turned around. This is the beginning, so do not come this way, guys. I'll realise momentarily, and then I'll be like, I know where this is. But such is what happens in a level like this, when everything kind of looks like blown up pieces of trains, so it can be quite difficult to distinguish what's different and what is where you haven't been. But if you come out of this area and you go through here like this, go through the train, Chris, as I shoot some dude there. But if you go through the train, it leads onto the side of that place. But at this moment in time, I just don't seem to have a clue. There we go. Go through the train, dude. And into this. So here's my pad showing you what it does. Such a pain in the ass, but there we go, and we can continue with the level. Many apologise. Perfect English there. Speaking of perfect English, I've heard my German's perfect too, because I've been pronouncing the word Uber wrong, because obviously I live in a German country that speaks a German language, and I'm fluent in said German language, so there you go. But speaking of this difficulty, I've mentioned earlier that there was a difficulty called Hardcore, and I was excited and interested to see what it would be. And I've now played it, and it is absolutely ridiculous. So when the developers were saying that the hardest difficulty on their game, I assume they're meaning this one will make people scream. I can kind of understand a hell of a lot more now what they mean, and it's a really big shame that there's no achievement for it, or there's no incentive for the people that need an incentive to play these kind of difficulties, because it's really something else. And it's on the same difficulty as this. It is set to Uber as a standard, but what they've done is they've taken out pickups for HP and for armor, sorry. And the game also says in that game mode, collectibles and perks are disabled. I'm not too sure if that's the case, because it feels like I'm getting perk benefits, but I believe what it says on the writing, so that stuff is all disabled. And how it works is, I thought your life would come back on checkpoints, and then it would turn it into a bit of a, you know, health regenerating checkpoint to checkpoint kind of game. But it doesn't, folks. And then I suddenly realised that it's going to be pretty damn difficult, because on the very first level, as you saw in this walkthrough, there's a moment where you're in a gun, a massive automatic weapon shooting at other planes, and it's part of the game that a plane flies into you and puts you down to critical life so that Fergus can revive you. The only problem is, it puts you down to super low HP, and on a game mode where you can't pick up HP, it forces you to have really small life. And then there's the instances with the fire, there's the instances with the jumps, there's the instances with that mechanical dog, and by the time you get to control and you're in the game, I had 20 life, which is essentially 1 or 2 shots away from death if I got unlucky, and it made getting through the trenches an absolute nightmare. And when I got to the stealth section, that's when things made a little bit more sense, because when you take a person down and do the kill animation, it got me life back. And when I killed the dogs, they dropped armor for some reason, and I could pick up armor. So even though it says there's no armor pickups, I was getting armor, so armor's definitely a thing. And another thing to bear in mind is I had 190 HP as my base value, because it's my character where I found nearly all the upgrades. So there are ways to definitely make it doable. There's just going to be sections on that difficulty that are incredibly challenging, and I don't think it's going to be something that's very fun to watch, because as you can see on this, the strategies I'm using here are very safe. You know, I'm using distance, I'm clipping a lot, I'm, you know, playing as defensive as possible to make sure that I don't take, you know, too much damage. And on that other difficulty, you're going to have to take that to an entirely different degree. It's literally going to be the most patient play ever, because if you lose a ton of life at the beginning of that chapter and there's no opportunities to stealth kill people, you're going to have to do them with tiny life, and it's going to turn something that might be quite arbitrary and simple into just a nightmare. And there's a few checkpoints on this game which are very long and very difficult, so it makes me wonder just how challenging they are going to be, and if it's going to be a case of having to restart the levels because you've just taken too much damage at a bad checkpoint. So as much as I'm interested that they've done something like this, I don't think it's a very fun difficulty. And I'm kind of conflicted at this moment in time, because Watch Dogs is due out, and I was really excited for it, and now it's here. I kind of don't care. It's one of those cases of I was so hyped, and then it got delayed that my hype has died, and it's now comatose. So I did have thoughts of trading this game in and putting it towards Watch Dogs, but then there's these new difficulties that I've unlocked, and there's the notion that I really enjoy this game and I might not like Watch Dogs, so I'm in another conflicted circumstance. Obviously a first world problem, but a problem nonetheless. So it's one of those weird things. And then from the channel's perspective, Watch Dogs probably might be very beneficial for the challenge, but I'm going to be playing it on current gen or maybe PC, because if I can get the PC copy, I'll be able to get the benefits of the really nice visuals without having to pay, you know, 400 quid for a next gen console. But I'm not too sure. I've already mentioned in this walkthrough that those kind of games, excuse me, aren't really my kind of game. And somebody left a comment on one of these early videos asking me, is there any game that I'm not good at? And I always answer these the same way. Like, if you like a game and you play it enough, you will get good at it. You know, being good at something is a relative term, because there's always somebody better and there's always somebody worse. And everyone's going to have those games that they don't play, so thus just by the very definition of not playing them, you're not exposed to them and you don't know how they work, and thus you're not very good at them. And the games for me that are like that, probably sports games, because I don't really play too many of those. Driving games, don't really play too many of those. Real-time strategy games, just not really my forte at all, but as I've mentioned, if I were to invest time, just like you can invest time, I'm sure anybody can get good at any of them, really. It's just how everything works. If you want to get good at guitar, you've got to put time in. You know, if you want to get good at singing, you've got to put the time in. If you want to get good at anything, You know, if you want to build your arms up and get big biceps, you have to put the time in. You can't cheat anymore. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. You can cheat. That's probably a terrible way to end that piece of conversation before this big gunfight. It's just cheating only takes you so far, and then you have to show you can do it. And if you've cheated, you can't do that, and thus it's all for naught. But this is a very big firefight. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be utilising the fact that the lens on this weapon, when you get all of those dots at the bottom fully charged, will consume all of your energy when it fires, but it's pretty much an instant kill on anything robotic. Anything organic dies as well. The only things it doesn't seem to kill are the super armoured mechs and the dog, those crazy armoured dogs. But this is a really big firefight, a really, really big one, and this right here is an example of a pretty decent clippy piece of cover, but it's also going to show you that this game is kind of interesting in the way that it delegates its damage and its hit system. Like, the enemies are so accurate from this distance that they're still clipping me even though I'm in the tiniest bit of cover. And like, imagine if this was on the hardcore mode. This is a very big firefight, and as I push forward I'm going to be triggering spawns which are going to put me in a situation where I'm far too close to enemies that can kill me very quickly. And you don't really want that for obvious reasons. So if you're on a mode where your life is, you know, permanently damaged, it's going to be pretty sick, because when you run up to somebody, it doesn't just automatically execute them. There's times when you'll just waft them like a wasp for some strange reason and take massive damage while it's happening, because the animation seems to only play if they're unaware of you or if you're countering their advance. So I'm not too sure if there's a timing involved, because I'm not that good at this game, but it surely makes that difficulty pretty crazy. Like, compared to the other ones, especially, the Iron Man mode is just patience and bullshit, really. The 999 mode it sounds pretty fun, and then the Walk in the Park mode sounds kind of pointless. Because this is not a game with an overpowering HUD, so if I didn't have the HUD, I most certainly don't think I'd miss it that much. Like, you know, compared to something like a Metro, where you actually have to go into these crazy interfaces to put on glasses and put on night vision and, you know, charge your lights and stuff, this game is quite mild when it comes to that UI kind of features. But now that we've cleared this out, it's one of those calms before the storm, because as we push up here, it's going to spawn some more people. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and trigger the spawns, like I just did then, and then I'm going to get back to this machine, charge this gun, and utilise its ability to kill these enemies. It's a slow strategy, folks, and I do apologise if you find it boring to watch, but as I've said time and time again with these guides, they're not about being fancy. You know, if you want to watch fancy playthroughs, you have to look for the more eclectic stuff that I've done. The stuff that is intended to show and display skill rather than instructional and hopefully helpful. Like, there really isn't any point in a walkthrough of showing supreme skill. And I know this might sound strange to some people, but that doesn't help the guy who can't do that. Like, I was on a video the other day which had an interesting point. A video by a guy called The Godfather Dictator, and he's one of my favourite channels on YouTube because he does insanely things that are incredibly impressive, and he does them at a very, very high level. It's a skill-oriented channel, and he's recently been talking about how he has to change because, you know, YouTube just isn't working the way he'd like it to, which is, you know, a reality for a lot of us. And there's a particular video which is the final boss of Vanquish on God Hard difficulty, which, depending on if you have much knowledge of this fight, it's probably one of the hardest bosses this generation. Like, the generation that's just passed. Because you die very fast. You die almost immediately from one-shots, and you're up against two enemies that are just as fast as you, in a room where the cover is shifting constantly. It's like, even on hard, it's tough, and then God Hard is about 20 steps above this. Like, anybody who's done the Tactical Challenge 6, that is set on normal, I think. And this is 2 difficulties higher than that, so just imagine the nonsense that you're fighting here. It's a very challenging fight that I myself haven't done yet. In fact, I haven't even got to that part yet, which is something I need to go back and sort out. But The Godfather Dictator has done a video where he beats it, and he's put commentary on it to tell you, you know, the things that helped him beat it. And I thought it was really interesting, some of the stuff he said, but what I found even more interesting was a guy who's also made a guide who is stuck at the last boss, which is a dude I speak about quite a lot, a guy called Big Benedict, as my pad starts bumming me right here. And Bick has essentially said that as awesome as this video is, it doesn't help him, because what is in that video is skill, and he doesn't feel that he has the ability or the, I don't really know what you would say, the acumen to do what that guy does in that video, because he's just not at that level. And it struck me that as pretty much the philosophy for walkthroughs. You know, as awesome as that video is, 90% of that fight is reflex and awareness, or maybe it's a bit smaller than that, and then the rest is kind of luck based, because nobody can help you fight those two dudes. It's all you. And at that point, like, the game has been hard, but nowhere near that level of difficulty, because it's a massive jump. The boss before it's very tough, but that final bit is insanity. And I just feel when it comes to these kind of videos that if you're doing something that is supremely skill-based, it's impressive to watch, but it's kind of undermining the point of a walkthrough. But that's just how I feel anyway. Please feel free to share your observations and what you think. But thank you for watching, and you take care now.